The religious love to say, here's how to talk to atheists, when they absolutely do not know how to talk to atheists or anyone else outside of their echo chambers. They have no real experience with atheists, not the rational, skeptical version who know the religious creed better than the religious themselves and know exactly how to take it apart. And that's what we're going to start looking at today. Stick around. This is honestly going to be a lot longer than I had intended it to be, but I think you'll see why as we go along. This is an article published on getprinciples.com, supposedly about how to talk to atheists, but this is absolutely not how you ought to go about it. This is how you get atheists to laugh at you, which the religious can never seem to figure out because they're so trapped in their own theological bubble that they can't even see the real world from where they are. So, fair warning, this is going to take a while, with the inevitable supercut coming eventually. So, I hope you enjoy. How to talk to atheists with clarity and confidence. Now, we see a lot of videos and articles that are, let's be honest, pretty negative. Oh, atheists just suck and all that. So I guess it is nice to see something that at least tries to be positive, and I do appreciate a little positivity here and there, but that isn't out there trying to attack the non-religious just because we exist. So for that, good show. However, this is going to turn into a laundry list of reasons why these discussions, well, they just never go well, do they? At least with educated atheists, because they make all the same mistakes in their mad rush toward religious happy land that we've come to expect. So I'm going to take time over the next couple of videos to go into detail and show why these ideas just do not work. And it's my hope that anyone religious who might be watching might learn why none of this impresses us at all, and why it really shouldn't impress them either. So let's get started and see where this goes. Back in 2013, at the height of the so-called New Atheism, I realized that many young people were being drawn into this movement, swayed by poor arguments and heated rhetoric, in particular through the internet. That group included a lot of very young Catholics who were never taught rational reasons to believe in God and had thus come to believe that religion was little more than superstition. Now, let's not fool ourselves. There is no new atheism, and there never was. It was just the first time that atheists could just get out there and be honest without having to face social, political, and legal problems for doing so. It wasn't that long ago when the religious could just kill your ass for saying things that they didn't like. I don't know when this article was written. It wasn't obvious anyway, at least not that I could find, and I suppose it really doesn't matter. I just like to point out that the new atheists were just the ones that couldn't be forced to shut up through religious pressure. And you notice that he's really kind of concerned here that Catholics were listening to atheists and deconverting, right? You have to keep them in the fold whether they want to be there or not. They only started caring about so-called rational reasons once we started showing just how irrational their religious beliefs actually were. Judging by the current flood out of the churches, I'd say it worked, wouldn't you? So anyhow, he describes it a little bit, but that's pretty much beyond our wheelhouse, so I'm going to just skip over that. And of course, if you want to read it, the link is in the description and you can go make yourself happy. Let's get on to the actual tips. Tip number 1, respect their intelligence. Some Christians think all atheists are ridiculous, so they openly mock or belittle those who question God. You should never make that mistake. Most atheists I have met are smart, sincere, and good-hearted, and even if they are not, treat them as if they were. Don't talk down to them or speak condescendingly, the way that you might to a child. Treat them with respect and acknowledge their intelligence. When you do, they'll be much more likely to listen to what you have to say. My friend, Catholic writer and speaker Jennifer Fulwiler, even recommends using this tactic as a clandestine spur to belief, saying something like, "Oh, come on, you're too smart to be an atheist. I know you can see through those bad arguments." Yeah, but isn't that condescending right there? Isn't that doing exactly what you're saying not to do? All right, in general, I'm on board with that. I mean, I think respect is earned, and for anyone, religious or otherwise, who at least tries, that ought to be respected at least to the degree that they've earned it. Granted, I don't think that a lot of theists, at least the kind that we tend to see around here, I don't think they've actually earned any. And that's why I've been on a futile search for years now, looking for any theist who doesn't rely entirely on faith, because faith doesn't mean anything. I want someone who is entirely rational when it comes to their religious beliefs. People who can say, here's the evidence that I looked at that led me to God. Let me walk you through the steps. That doesn't go, but I just want to believe, because wanting to believe doesn't mean anything. I don't think we're ever going to find anybody like that, because those people don't tend to exist, at least not in my very extensive experience. But hey, I haven't seen them all, so you never know. Now, we could go off into the weeds on this, and that's not really the topic of this video. So if you want to talk about it some more, we can do that down in the comments. But let's get back to his tips, because I don't think this is actually going to get him anywhere. Do you? Tip number 2, find common ground. When you talk with a religious skeptic, you will likely disagree about God and religion. Do not start there. Instead, focus on areas of agreement. For instance, perhaps you both appreciate the value of science or critical thinking. Start with that. Hopefully, you both agree that we should follow the evidence wherever it leads, even if it requires us to reject some cherished beliefs and to change our minds. Yeah, but how often do we find theists who are willing to do that? Virtually never. Most of the people that we look at, and that includes Catholics, they reject science when it disagrees with their religious beliefs. They want to believe things that are not supportable in the real world. It would be great if they would say, yep, if it doesn't match up to reality, we're going to reject it. But that is not how religion works. At least I've never met anybody who was willing to do that. And that's the thing. I've read a lot of articles like this, watched a couple of videos, and they very clearly, they're not the ones that you tend to see out in the wild. I don't think that if we actually talked to them, they would actually follow any of this, because this isn't their religion. And we've looked at a lot of Catholics who obviously are not following any of this, so this is not standard Catholicism. This is, we're going to say the things that comfort the people that we're making the videos for or writing the articles for so that we make more money. Because usually that's what this is all about. But anyway, let's get back to it. Begin your conversation on a good foot and find common ground. Then, once you have established some rapport, you will be ready to move on to points of disagreement. And that would be great and all, but I find increasingly that there really isn't much common ground to be had with a lot of religious people. Now, the idea is fine. I agree that we should try to find it, but when I talk about finding common ground, I mean finding a common agreement on the evidential requirements for the existence of God. I mean getting rid of faith as a determining factor. Faith doesn't mean anything. It never has, and it never will, and just getting the religious to acknowledge that faith means nothing, that would certainly help, but they won't do it, will they? They don't accept the faith of other religions as lending credence to their beliefs, so why should their own be any different? Common ground is a fantastic idea if we could actually get them to give up the absurd double standards that they use in their own beliefs. And I'm certainly not holding my breath on that. Tip number 3, ask good questions. Instead of trying to present your views aggressively to your atheist friend, there's those atheist friends again that we know they don't have, first ask them what they believe. This tact will accomplish two results simultaneously. First, you will understand where they are coming from, so you are not responding to a straw man version of their beliefs. Second, you will force them to clarify exactly what they believe, which can lead them to detect holes in their view that will cause them to question their atheist beliefs. Yes, you do need to ask good questions, but you also have to have good answers. You have to realize that everyone isn't just like you are, which I think we all know the religious have a real problem with. This is where most conversations with the religious start to go sideways. But I have faith, and therefore everyone has faith. But my book says everyone believes in God, and it just has to be right, so there. This is where these things go sideways so often. They are so used to the religious echo chamber that they've lived in forever that they don't know how to listen to anyone outside of it. They are automatically right? They are used to preaching, not learning, and when it becomes obvious just how weak their position is, which doesn't take long when they start talking to people who know their position better than they do, when people don't take all of the things that they believe is automatically correct, which is what happens as soon as they step outside their echo chamber, then they just don't know how to handle themselves. And that needs to change. So while, yes, they should ask good questions, you notice what the questions that they're asking are. They're not about the existence of God. They're not about evidentiary standards. They're about, well, what do you believe? Well, guess what? As an atheist, in my atheism, I don't believe anything because atheism is the answer to one and only one question. Do you believe in any gods? The answer is no, I'm an atheist, that's it. It has no bearing on anything else in my life. And this is just a distraction. We are not just like they are. They need to figure it out. Along these lines, there are two questions I love to raise with an atheist. First, I like to ask, which argument for God do you find strongest, and why does it fail? Or to ask it another way, what's the best reason to believe in God, and why does it not convince you? This angle puts them on the spot, not in a bad way, but in a way that causes them to reflect on whether they've actually considered the God question fairly and thoroughly. All right, I'll be honest, and I've been asked those questions many, many times before, and for the first, there isn't any. Every single argument for God is absurdly weak and depends on irrational preconceptions and wishful thinking. If you don't start with a belief that a God exists, chances are you're not going to end up with a belief in a God because all of those preconceptions required already require faith. If you don't start with faith, you're not going to end up with faith. That's kind of the problem. We're going to see all of that play out in this article, I'm sure. For the second question, it's really the same thing since they're really just variations on a theme. I have never once, not ever, seen a halfway decent reason to believe in any God of any kind, period. They're all just faith-based nonsense. Why don't I believe? Because there is no evidence. Not the wishful thinking that you people push, but actual, demonstrable, verifiable evidence that points directly to an actual God. You people can't even define how you know anything about your gods because it's all just shit you made up in your heads. This is not impressive. And I think we're going to see more of that coming up. In my experience, few atheists have actually read books defending God or have studied the issue at length. Yeah, but I have. I've read lots of them. I have a lot of them just sitting on my bookshelf, and I've read every single one. Every single one of them has the same problem, and that problem is faith. If you don't start out with faith, you don't get to belief. I have no faith in anything, at least not in the Hebrews 11:1 sense. I have well-reasoned, well-evidenced trust in things that I have seen for myself. But the religious, they just can't get there with their gods. They just insist that it has to be true because it gives them an emotional woody. And I don't do that. I don't care about feelings. I care about facts. And that's why I have not been convinced of any of the things that they claim. And they can't get that through their heads, can they? Therefore, they'll usually respond by referencing a relatively poor argument or reason, one that you and I could probably quickly reject. The most common answer they give is, well, the world is so complex that many people rely on God to explain things like biological complexity, things that science can't currently explain. But science is increasingly closing all those gaps of knowledge, pushing God to the margins. Now, I would never say that, although it probably is true to a certain degree. I think the reason that most people believe is fear and indoctrination. But often, that indoctrination is based on fear. I mean, just listen to them. They are terrified of the world that they live in. They're terrified to die. They're afraid of other people. They're afraid of uncomfortable ideas, and they are utterly terrified of themselves. Their gods are all big scary monsters in the sky that they bow down to out of fear of what would happen to them if they don't. Psalms 11:110, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, yada yada yada. They live in a world of perpetual fear. And I don't. I just accept reality as it is, whether I like it or not, because what I like doesn't matter. It is what it is. I am not important, and they can't handle that. It's why they are so terrified of everything. But let's continue. This is what is known as a God of the Gaps argument, and it is so weak an argument that no serious Christian could rely on it. Except most do. That's the problem. When I talk to the religious, they don't seem to know an awful lot about religion, do they? They don't seem to know what the religious are actually saying, because they've got this idea in their head that doesn't actually hold true in reality. Most theists are using the God of the Gaps argument, at least in some way. Well, I don't understand that, or I don't like that, therefore God done it. That's a God of the Gaps argument, and that's what everything in theology is based on, filling in God as the answer to questions you don't currently have an answer to. But that's not how that works, is it? So, when your atheist friend suggests that it is the strongest reason for belief that he can think of, you can kindly reply saying, "Oh, that's the best reason you've encountered? I can think of several better reasons to believe in God than that. For example," and then explain another more powerful argument, like the one further down in this essay. Yeah, we'll get to that. I don't think that any of it is going to work out as you all hope that it will. Yes, I've kind of looked forward. I have to when I'm doing articles. I don't in videos. Articles are a different matter. But I know what's coming, and I know that it's all ludicrous. I mean, we'll get there. This is just an opening straw man because I can't imagine that a lot of atheists are actually going to say that. I mean, not well-studied atheists anyhow. But as I said, we'll get there eventually. Let's let him meander on for a while, though. Another strategy is to ask, what would it take for you to believe in God? This question will help reveal whether the person is genuinely open to believing in God or whether he is closed-minded, demanding such an impossibly high standard of evidence. Well, that's what it would take for me. It would take evidence. Got any? I don't mean faith or arguments. I mean actual demonstrable evidence that can be found and evaluated without having to believe in it first or having to hold preconceptions that are not verifiable in the real world. And the answer to that, of course, is no. This whole, well, this will separate those people who are ready to believe from those who aren't, is just stupid. It's the same crap that STR pulls. They know that the vast majority of people that their students are going to talk to are just going to laugh because all of the arguments that they've been equipped with are absurdly weak. This is designed to separate the people who actually know what they're talking about from the ones that are going to go, okay, and then just go along with it. Because the religious are terrified of the first group. When I ask atheists this question, I sometimes hear, well, I guess I'd believe in God if he appeared right in front of me and told me that he existed, or if he wrote something in the stars such as, my name is God and I exist. The problem with answers like this, as you can point out, is that such displays might be surprising and extraordinary, but even if they occurred, a skeptic would still find some way to explain them away. And that is true, which is why I don't answer that way. I'll be honest, I don't know what it would take to convince me, because any idea that I've ever come up with, I can imagine non-godly reasons for it. That's not a weakness, that's a strength. It shows that I am looking for the actual truth, not just a comforting fantasy. If your God exists, then he would know what it would take to convince me. Therefore, either God doesn't want me to know he's real, at which point I should just keep doing what I'm doing, or God isn't real, at which point I should just keep doing what I'm doing. There's more, of course, but I'll get to that in a second. For example, maybe the skeptic was just hallucinating when he encountered someone claiming to be God. Or maybe what looked like writing in the stars was actually a light projection from some prankster or government experiment. Experiences like these can always be explained away through natural causes. So, if these are the sort of answers you get, push back a little and suggest we really need a higher and more convincing reason to believe in God, something like a philosophical argument. And then again, present such an argument. The problem with all of this is that the religious don't actually have anything of value to present. When they say, well, what would it take to convince you? They don't have that thing to present no matter what you say. Otherwise, they would have already presented it, and I'd already believe. None of it matters. Even if I had an example, they couldn't just say, oh, you mean like this, and present whatever I said, because they don't actually have anything. This is just a distraction from the utter failure on their side. It's a way to say, well, that's just being unreasonable, as if that matters. Unreasonable or not, and I don't think anything is, it would still be what it was going to take for that individual, and in the absence of that evidence, they're just not going to believe. Now that you know, you can safely head for the hills, able to rationalize why you didn't really care if God was real or not. That's just not how any of this works. You need to knock it off. So anyway, that's where we're going to stop for the day before we get to his argument. This looks like it's going to be a long one, so be prepared. It'll make the Supercut fans happy, at least down the line, so there is that. Anyway, what did you think so far? Let me know down in the comments. I come across these How to X articles once in a while, and especially when it comes to converting the unbelievers, they are always really, really dumb. It's like they expect us to be every bit as stupid as the religiously gullible, which we're not, at least by and large. We look at these claims and we just roll our eyes because we know better. We have already studied these things, mostly because we've heard them over and over and over again, and we already have a response. Not that the religious want to hear it, because as we know, they just don't care. They just really want to believe while we don't. We don't have a vested interest in getting to their God like they do. We just want the truth, whatever the hell that happens to be. At least I do, since I don't really want to speak for anyone else. If you want something else, let me know that down in the comments too, but I don't think we're going to get a lot of disagreement on this one, do you? Anyway, I guess we're going to have to see. So until next time, next week, let's just leave it at that. Have fun, and I will see you all for part 2.